Into the furnace. The holographic display in the Terran Defense Council chamber flickered with the cold, geometric patterns of the Hegemony Empire's ultimatum. Admiral Rebecca Chen stood rigid as the alien voice concluded its message with mechanical precision. Your species will surrender unconditionally within 72 Earth hours or face complete extermination. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. The chamber fell silent as the transmission ended. Around the circular table, humanity's greatest military minds sat in stunned defeat. General Morrison rubbed his weathered face, while Strategic Commander Petrov stared at his hands. They all knew the truth. Earth's conventional weapons were useless against the hegemony's adaptive shielding technology. Options? Admiral Chen asked, though her voice carried little hope. We have none, General Morrison replied flatly. Their shields adapt to any energy signature within seconds. Our plasma cannons, rail guns, even nuclear warheads, they're all neutralized before impact. We've run every simulation. Conventional warfare against the hegemony is suicide. Dr. Elena Vasquez cleared her throat from the civilian section. The young engineer's dark eyes held a dangerous gleam that Chen recognized. Actually, Admiral, there might be one option, but you're not going to like it. Chen gestured for her to continue. The Prometheus Project, Vasquez said, standing. 12 experimental fusion ships that we've been developing in the Jupiter shipyards. They're unstable. Unstable how? Strategic Commander Petrov leaned forward, frowning. Vasquez activated her tablet, projecting technical schematics into the air. The fusion cores operate at temperatures exceeding those found in stellar cores. The containment systems are experimental, prone to cascade failures. Current survival projections for a standard mission are 40%. 40%. General Morrison stood abruptly. You're talking about sending people to their deaths. I'm talking about our only chance. Vasquez shot back. The hegemony's shields adapt to predictable energy patterns. But what if the energy isn't predictable? What if it's so chaotic, so unstable, that their systems can't compensate fast enough? Admiral Chen studied the schematics. The Prometheus-class ships looked more like contained nuclear explosions than vessels. You want to use our own ship's instability as a weapon. Exactly. Each ship is essentially a barely controlled star. If we can get close enough to their fleet before the containment fails. Vasquez let the implication hang in the air. Commander Lu Wei, who had remained silent, finally spoke. This is madness. You're asking for volunteers for a suicide mission with a 60% fatality rate, and that's before we even engage the enemy. Sometimes madness is all we have left. A new voice said from the chamber's entrance. Captain Jake Morrison, the general's son, walked in wearing his test pilot uniform. I've been flying the Prometheus prototypes for 6 months. They're dangerous, unpredictable, and absolutely terrifying, which means they're perfect for fighting an enemy that thinks they have us figured out. General Morrison's face paled. Jake, no. I won't lose you to this. Dad, you won't lose me. You'll lose all of us if we do nothing. Jake moved to stand beside Dr. Vasquez. I've seen what these ships can do when they malfunction. The energy cascades are unlike anything in nature. If we can weaponize that chaos. Admiral Chen made her decision. How long to prep the fleet? 18 hours, Vasquez replied immediately. But Admiral, I need to be clear about what we're asking these crews to do. The ship's fusion cores will be operating at 120% capacity. At that level, we can maybe maintain stable flight for 6 hours before critical system failures begin. And the crews know this. Captain Morrison nodded. Every test pilot on the project has volunteered. We all know the risks. The next 18 hours passed in frantic preparation. The Prometheus ships were sleek, silver vessels that seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. Each one housed a crew of 12, pilot, navigator, engineer, weapons specialist, and 8 support crew members who would manage the ship's volatile systems. Dr. Vasquez worked alongside the engineering teams, pushing the fusion cores to their absolute limits. Remember, she told each crew, these ships aren't meant to be predictable. When systems start failing, and they will, don't fight it. Use it. Channel the chaos. Captain Morrison ran final system checks on his ship, the Defiance. Around him, his crew moved with the focused calm of people who had accepted their likely fate. His engineer, Maria Santos, was actually humming as she calibrated the fusion core. "You seem remarkably cheerful for someone on a suicide mission," Jake observed. Maria grinned. "Captain, I've spent my whole career trying to make perfectly stable systems. For once, I get to embrace the chaos. It's liberating." The launch came too soon. 12 Prometheus ships rose from Earth's surface, their hulls glowing with contained stellar fire. As they cleared the atmosphere, long-range sensors detected the approaching hegemony fleet. 300 ships in perfect formation, each one the size of a city. "Jesus," whispered Navigator Torres from the Defiance's bridge. "How are we supposed to fight that?" "We're not fighting it," Captain Morrison replied, studying the tactical display. "We're going to confuse the hell out of it." The human fleet accelerated toward certain death. Behind them, Earth's population of 8 billion people watched through every available screen and neural link. This was humanity's last stand. As the fleets closed distance, the hegemony ships began their standard intimidation protocol. Massive energy beams lanced out, striking the void where conventional ships would have maneuvered defensively. But the Prometheus ships didn't follow conventional patterns. Their unstable systems made their flight paths erratic, unpredictable. "Hegemony shields are adapting to our approach vectors," reported Tactical Officer Kim from the Prometheus. "But they're having trouble locking onto our signatures." Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled over the comm system from her position on the Icarus. "That's because we don't have consistent signatures. Our cores are fluctuating too wildly for their computers to analyze." The first exchange of fire came at 12,000 kilometers. Hegemony plasma beams reached out like fingers of death, but the human ship's erratic movements and energy fluctuations made targeting nearly impossible. 3 shots missed entirely. One grazed the Daedalus, causing a cascade failure that should have destroyed the ship. Instead, Chief Engineer Park channeled the failure through the ship's weapon systems. The resulting energy discharge was so chaotic, so unpredictable, that when it struck the nearest hegemony cruiser, the alien ship's shields couldn't adapt fast enough. The blast punched through their defenses and crippled their primary systems. "Did you see that?" Captain Morrison shouted over the comm. "Use your failures. Turn every malfunction into a weapon." The battle became a dance of controlled chaos. Prometheus ships pushed their systems beyond all safety limits, embracing the cascade failures and system breakdowns that would normally spell doom. Instead of trying to maintain stable flight, they weaponized their instability. The Phoenix lost attitude control and tumbled wildly toward 3 hegemony destroyers. Rather than attempting to regain stability, Captain Rodriguez opened fire during the tumble, creating a spiraling pattern of energy blasts that overwhelmed the enemy ship's defensive calculations. The Atlas suffered a complete fusion core breach. Instead of ejecting the core, Engineer Thompson redirected the explosion through modified torpedo tubes, creating a shotgun blast of stellar fire that disabled an entire enemy squadron. But the cost was brutal. The Hermes couldn't contain a fusion cascade and simply vanished in a ball of artificial sunlight. The Titan broke apart under the stress of its own power systems, taking 18 brave souls with it. The Olympus managed one last desperate ramming attack before its containment failed. By the time the human fleet reached close quarters, only 9 Prometheus ships remained, but something impossible was happening on the hegemony side. Their perfect formations were breaking apart. Ships were firing on their own allies. The chaos wasn't just tactical, it was spreading through their entire fleet structure. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez's voice was tight with excitement and fear. "Their central command system is trying to process our attack patterns, but we don't have attack patterns. We're too chaotic, too unpredictable. Their networked intelligence is having something like a breakdown. Captain Morrison saw his opportunity. The Hegemony flagship, a massive dreadnought that coordinated the entire fleet, was surrounded by its own confused escort ships. Its shields were fluctuating as its systems tried to adapt to threats that changed faster than they could be analyzed. All ships target the flagship. Everything we have. The remaining 9 Prometheus ships converged on the enemy flagship like moths drawn to flame. But these moths carried the fire of stars in their hearts. As they closed distance, their fusion cores began the final cascade that would mean death for them all. But death, the humans had learned, could be a weapon too. The first ship to reach the flagship was the Defiance herself. Forged in fire, Captain Jake Morrison felt his ship shuddering as the fusion core moved beyond critical into the realm of contained stellar collapse. Around him, his crew worked with the focused intensity of people who had moved beyond fear into a place of pure purpose. Core temperature at 140%, Maria Santos called out, her voice steady despite the readings that should have terrified any sane engineer. Containment field fluctuating between 12 and 18% efficiency. Perfect, Jake replied, because in this moment, perfect meant absolutely catastrophic by any normal standard. Navigation. Plot and intercept course with the flagship. Don't worry about making it smooth. Navigator Torres laughed. Actually laughed. Smooth went out the window about 10 minutes ago, Captain. We're basically riding a controlled explosion toward their command ship. The Hegemony flagship, Eternal Dominion, was a kilometer-long monument to the Empire's technological superiority. Its commander, Hierarchical Prime Zexith, stood in the central command sphere surrounded by holographic displays that showed his fleet's impossible situation. For the first time in his 3-century military career, his tactical computers were providing contradictory analysis. How can their attack patterns be both ineffective and devastating? He demanded of his tactical officers. Unknown, Hierarchical Prime. Their weapon signatures change every few seconds. Our shields adapt to one pattern, but by then they've moved to something completely different. It's as if they're improvising. The concept was foreign to Zexith. The Hegemony's strength came from perfect coordination, predictable patterns, overwhelming force applied with mathematical precision. These humans fought like they were making up their tactics in real time, which he was beginning to realize they were. Flagship. This is Icarus. Dr. Vasquez's voice cut through the static. Her ship was approaching from the flagship's port side, leaving a trail of exotic radiation that confused every sensor trying to track it. My fusion core just went supercritical. I've got maybe 90 seconds before containment collapse. Can you reach their shield generators? Captain Morrison asked. I can do better than that. I can reach their primary power distribution node. If I can get close enough, the core breach should cascade through their entire energy grid. Jake watched his tactical display as the Icarus began its final approach. Around them, the remaining Prometheus ships were engaging Hegemony vessels in the most chaotic naval battle in galactic history. The Pandora had somehow managed to use a navigation system failure to teleport behind enemy lines, something that should have been impossible but had somehow worked. The Odyssey was firing weapons that technically shouldn't exist, created by rerouting power from life support through modified waste recycling systems. But it was what was happening to the Hegemony fleet that truly amazed him. Individual ships were breaking away from the central command network, their crews making decisions that contradicted direct orders. The rigid hierarchy that had made the Empire invincible was cracking under the strain of trying to fight an enemy that refused to follow any logical pattern. Defiance. This is Hierarchical Prime Zexith. The alien commander's voice came over the communication channel, and for the first time, Jake heard something in it he hadn't expected: curiosity. Your tactics make no sense. Your ships are failing. Your crews are dying. Yet, somehow, you're winning. How? Jake looked around his bridge. where Maria was literally hugging a console that was shooting sparks while Torres navigated by pure instinct and improvisation. "We're not trying to win by your rules," he replied. "We're making our own rules as we go." There was a long pause. That should not be possible. Should not be possible is humanity's specialty. The Icarus reached the flagship's shields just as Dr. Vasquez's fusion core went into complete collapse. Instead of simply exploding, the carefully destabilized containment field created a cascade of exotic energy that the hegemony shields had never encountered. The energy didn't just punch through the shields. It infected them, spreading chaos through the flagship's entire defensive grid. "This is impossible," Hierarchical Prime Zexith said, and Jake could hear the wonder in his voice. "Your ship is destroying itself, but it's taking our systems with it. The chaos is spreading." Dr. Elena Vasquez's last transmission came through clearly. "That's the point. Chaos is contagious. We just have to be brave enough to start the infection." But Jake saw something else happening on his sensors, something that changed everything. Throughout the hegemony fleet, individual ships were powering down their weapons, not because they were destroyed, but because their crews were choosing to stop fighting. "This is Commander Thylex of the destroyer Perfect Order," came a transmission on the general frequency. The voice belonged to a hegemony officer, but it carried an uncertainty that Jake had never heard from their species. "We don't understand what we're seeing. Your people are dying to stop us, but not in the way warriors die. They're dying like people who have chosen something more important than their own lives." Captain Morrison realized what was happening. The hegemony's networked consciousness meant that the chaos wasn't just tactical, it was philosophical. Watching humans embrace their own deaths to protect their homeworld, seeing crews turn their failures into weapons and their weaknesses into strengths, was forcing individual hegemony soldiers to question the rigid hierarchy they'd never thought to doubt. "All human ships," Jake transmitted, "I'm taking Defiance into the flagship's command center. Our core is past critical. Maria, how long do we have?" "Maybe 30 seconds before the fusion bottle collapses completely," Santos replied, her hand steady on controls that were literally melting under the energy feedback. "But Captain, if we ram them at this power level, the explosion will take out everything within 10 kilometers. Including us. Including their entire command structure." Jake nodded. "Torres, can you get us there?" The navigator was steering by feel now, his instruments having given up any pretense of accuracy. "I can get us close, Captain. The rest is up to physics and luck." As the Defiance made its final approach, Jake opened a channel to the hegemony flagship. "Hierarchical Prime Zexith, I want you to understand something. We're not attacking you because we hate you. We're doing this because some things are worth dying for." "Your logic is flawed," Zexith replied, but his voice had lost its mechanical certainty. "Death serves no tactical purpose." "Death serves no tactical purpose," Jake agreed as his ship began to shake apart around him. "But choice does, and sometimes you have to die to prove that choice exists." The Defiance struck the Eternal Dominion amidships, and Jake Morrison's fusion core, pushed far beyond any theoretical limit, finally gave up its fight against entropy. The explosion was visible from Earth, a new star that burned for 17 seconds before fading to memory. But in those 17 seconds, something unprecedented happened. The destruction of the flagship didn't just eliminate the hegemony's command structure. It severed the network connections that had bound individual ships to central control. Across the fleet, thousands of hegemony soldiers suddenly found themselves making their own decisions for the first time in their lives. The battle ended not with surrender, but with a kind of awakening. Commander Thylex was the first to power down his weapons completely. Within minutes, half the hegemony fleet had followed suit. They didn't surrender. Surrender implied defeat, and this wasn't defeat. This was transformation. "Attention human survivors," Thylex transmitted to the 4 remaining Prometheus ships. I don't know how to express this in your language. We were created to follow orders, to maintain perfect unity. But watching your people choose death over submission, seeing how you turned your own destruction into victory, it has shown us that there might be other ways to exist. The surviving human crews found themselves in the surreal position of being thanked by their former enemies. The hegemony ships that had chosen independence began requesting permission to study human culture, to understand how a species could be so chaotic and yet so purposeful. Dr. Vasquez's sacrifice had done more than breach the flagship's defenses. It had infected an entire civilization with the concept of individual choice. The journey back to Earth took 3 days. Behind them, the transformed hegemony fleet spread out across the galaxy, no longer an empire but a collection of independent ships exploring what it meant to make their own decisions. Some would become explorers, others would become protectors of smaller worlds, and a few would choose to settle down and try their hand at peaceful pursuits they'd never imagined possible. As the 4 surviving Prometheus ships entered Earth's orbit, they were greeted by a planet-wide celebration. But for Captain Rodriguez of the Phoenix, Lieutenant Commander Park of the Daedalus, Captain Smith of the Hermes, and Captain Chen of the Atlas, the real victory wasn't in the battle they'd won. It was in the choice they'd made to fight it. Humanity had faced extinction and responded not with surrender, but with the most dangerous thing in the universe: the willingness to embrace chaos in service of something greater than themselves. They had turned their own mortality into a weapon and their weakness into strength. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would humanity, who had learned that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from refusing to surrender, but from choosing what to surrender for. In the end, they hadn't just saved Earth. They had saved the very concept of choice itself.